This is Garis, Masculist, MGTOW, flyers. That is 2-3 page essays on the themes of Masculism and MGTOW. Written by and read aloud by Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. This is flyer number 611, entitled The Masculist Humbling of Women. Description. Masculists are fed up with the monoconscious arrogance and gender political bias of feminazis and crush them in public when they come across women who preach that women are morally superior to men, etc. This flyer supplies masculist arguments that men and boys can use to crush feminazi arrogance, which is more a religion to women than fact. Masculist superiority arguments are much more science-based and hence stronger than feminist superiority arguments. Now the flyer itself. The Masculist Humbling of Women by Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. Email profhugodegaris@yahoo.com. Website profhugodegaris.wordpress.com. Today's monoconscious feminist is insufferably arrogant and needs to be confronted with masculinist ideology to humble her, to bring her down a peg or three, so that she starts living in the real world again, instead of remaining brainwashed in her feminist ideology that women are superior to men in general and that men are pigs, rapists, toxic, etc. This flyer gives men the intellectual tools supplied by masculist ideas to humble women, to bring them down, back to earth, so that women see that many of their feminist beliefs are mere superstitions that act more like a religion on women than a presentation of facts. The feminists have had a monopoly over gender politics for 6 decades, so women, feministed women, have been powerfully brainwashed that gender oppression is a one-way street, that it is men who are the oppressors and women who are the oppressed. Feminism, by its nature, is deeply misandrist and gynocentric because, in capital letters, it says nothing about how women oppress men. If you're a young woman and you've been pumped full of feminist ideas all your life, literally, then this monoconscious feminist ideology will influence your view on life, and particularly on men. Your feminist brainwashing will teach you that men are not to be trusted, that men will rape you, that men are the warmongers, so are toxic, that men are violent, who can hurt you, etc. When you hear all your life how men oppress women, then not surprisingly, you're going to see men with suspicion at a certain emotional distance, since you have a deeply ingrained view of men as being morally inferior to women, since that is all that you have heard, gender politically speaking, all your life. Feminist, monoconscious feminist ideas have clouded your view of life, of relations between the sexes. Masculists are fed up with feminist misandry, particularly given that masculists, bi-conscious masculists, who are as well informed how men oppress women as women oppress men, know very well that gender oppression is very much a two-way street, that in fact women oppress men worse. To masculists, feminists harping on how gender politically evil men are towards women, when masculists know that women commit far worse gender crimes against men, brackets, for example, manslavery, divorce, rape, forced fathering, etc. Close brackets, is simply maddening to masculists due to the profound hypocrisy of the feminists who lash out at men for the ways that men oppress women, when in reality it is women who oppress men far worse, since many of women's gender crimes against men are horrible and last decades. Masculists are so pissed with the hypocrisy and bigotry of monoconscious feminists that when they come across one, they bite her fucking head off, haranguing her out of the room with a verbally vicious masculist attack, making her conscious that she is seen by masculists as an MFB, that's monoconscious feminazi bigot, and hated by masculists. Masculists have the gender political tools now to truly humble women, to kill off their monoconscious feminazi arrogance by showing men and boys with masculist arguments how women are inferior to men in many respects. If a man is well versed in these masculist superiority arguments, that is the scientific evidence for male superiority, then he can humble an arrogant monoconscious feminist by crushing her inflated ego, by telling her some very damning truths about women that are familiar to masculisted men. Masculists aim to teach all men about these male superiorities so that when men are confronted with feminist arguments, they can not only answer back to these MFBs, monoconscious feminazi bigots, but can crush them, ramming down these women's throats that their monoconscious feminism is deeply misandrist and biased, that has not taken into account the masculist message that in fact women oppress men worse, and hence feminist, monoconscious feminist attacks on men are deeply hypocritical and bigoted, and hence contemptible, which is why masculists bite monoconscious feminists' fucking heads off. If a biconscious masculist hears some woman sprouting misandrist feminist ideas, then if he is a biconscious masculist, well informed of masculist ideas, he can crush her with masculist facts of female inferiority. For example, by using the following facts regarding women's intellectual inferiority relative to men. The most damning fact about women relative to men is that women have 10% smaller brains than men. Google it. Women have been sexually selecting men who are smarter than themselves for millions of years, so that their children will benefit from the superior genes of superior men. This instinct of women to mate up is called hypergamy, and all women have it. Pen hens sexually select peacocks who have larger plumes of feathers. So surprise, surprise, peacocks have large plumes of feathers. This idea can be generalized as follows. Any trait that men have had to pass through the sexual selection filter of women. Expressed alternatively, men are the way they are because women wanted men that way. Women have always had a monopoly over reproduction, so women breed men who are the way that women want men to be. This fact makes feminist criticism of men regarding certain respects contradictory, since those respects were sexually selected by women in the distant past. For example, men are aggressive because women sexually selected men who were aggressive, since aggressive men were more able to defend her against other aggressive men, particularly against warriors of warring neighbouring tribes. It was in women's self-interest in distant times to sexually select men who were taller, stronger, fiercer, smarter than women. Why? Because taller, stronger, fiercer men were more able to defend their women from tall, strong, fierce other men, either from enemy tribes or even from other men in her own tribe. The preference for men to be taller than women is strongly ingrained in women's DNA and is as strong as non-smokers preferring other non-smokers. Women chose smarter men to mate with because smarter men on the whole made better hunters who brought home the bacon for his woman and their kids. As a result of this sexual preference by women for smarter men, it's to be expected that men are smarter on average than women. This has been researched, in brackets. For example, Professors Philippe Rushton, R-U-S-H-T-O-N, and Richard Lynn, L-Y-N-N, who showed independently that men on average are about 4 IQ points smarter than women. Men have a 10% higher IQ variance than women, which means that women's IQ scores over a whole population are more bunched up, whereas men's are more spread out, which means that the morons and the genii are males. So the fact that men have won 99% of science Nobel Prizes is to be expected. Women lack genius, which is one of the major reasons why men don't take women very seriously, since men have a higher respect level for other men than for women. Men have 10 times the testosterone levels in their blood, so are much more aggressive, dogged, persistent, so finish up difficult tasks far more readily than women, who are much more wishy-washy and give up a lot more easily, and hence accomplish far less than men. Women's greatly inferior accomplishment track record is the major reason why men don't respect women as a sex. Women oppress men far worse than men oppress women, since many of women's gender crimes are horrible and last decades, the big three being women's manslavery, women's divorce rape, and women's forced fathering. When Masculists hear feminists, monoconscious feminists, castigating men for men's oppression of women, Masculists harangue these feminists with how women oppress men far worse, and are very verbally aggressive with these women, since Masculists see such women as hypocrites and bigots, labelling them MFBs, monoconscious feminazi bigots. Masculists are very aware that women have always been parasites of men. It is men who build cultures, and it is women who parasite off them. Men on the whole only tolerated women because of women's two traditional monopolies of vagina and womb. But thanks to men's engineering genius, the sex bots are here now. And Japanese scientists have already grown a goat in an artificial womb, so human babies are not far off. So when men can grow their own kids and prefer to sex their bots with their delicious curves, their film star faces, and creamy, grippy vaginas, in brackets, and increasingly we'll be having relationships with them thanks to the new revolution in artificial intelligence, which is allowing men to have real conversations with robots, close brackets, men will ignore women since their sex bots and art wombs will give them better sex and men can grow their own kids. By ramming home the above facts, Masculists can quickly humble monoconscious, arrogant feminazis, crushing their egos with Masculist facts of male superiority. As these Masculist ideas spread, then boys at school can not only answer back at the insufferable arrogance of monoconscious feminists, but can crush them with Masculist arguments of male superiority. These Masculist attacks on feminists will humble them, force them to rethink their attitudes of female superiority when they see young men spitting in their faces for their female chauvinism, which is based on myth, on monoconscious feminist dogma that has little regard for reality, whereas Masculist superiority arguments are strongly science-based. As most men become intellectually armed with Masculist male superiority arguments, then women will become a lot more humble, because if they aren't, then there will be so many Masculists around that these women will know that if they make misandrist arguments in public or express female superiority arguments, then they will risk having their fucking heads bitten off by very angry, hateful Masculists who have completely lost patience with feminist monoconscious arrogance and gender political ignorance and crush their egos to stop them sprouting such monoconscious garbage. Cheers. Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. Email profhugodegaris@yahoo.com. Website profhugodegaris.wordpress.com. Author of the book Masculism, Men's Rebellion Against Being Man's Slaves to Women, and e-textbook of 610 plus Masculist flyers for men's studies courses. Freely downloadable in Microsoft Word format from my website. Ciao.